We are back with Media in Society. We are talking about part two of media and government politics. And I know that last part was maybe a little dry for some people. I mean, I kind of like that stuff, but I think you'll like this segment a little bit better. So, how did we get to where we are today in terms of media and how we are governed? I don't really have time to share the history going back to the beginning of our nation, maybe fortunately for you, right? But I would like to start with the period from the late 1950s to about the end of the 1970s, something historians call the network era. And so what I'm going to roll now is a little bit from the Kennedy Nixon presidential debates in 1960. It was really a series of televised debates between presidential candidate John F. Kennedy and Richard Nixon, which really marks television's grand entrance into politics. 70 million people tuned in to what you are seeing right here. Let me actually roll some of that right now. I think you can still hear me over that.
1946, we both
it was really the first opportunity for voters to see their candidates in competition, and the visual contrast was dramatic. Let's watch a little bit.
Experience in government is comparable. Secondly, I think the question is, what are the programs that we advocate? What is the party record that we lead? I come out of the Democratic Party, which in this century has produced Woodrow Wilson and Franklin Roosevelt and Harry Truman.
I have no comment. The next question to Vice President Nixon from Mr. Van-Oker.
Mr. Vice President, since the question of executive leadership is a very important campaign issue, I'd like to follow Mr. Novin's question. Now, Republican campaign slogans, you'll see them on signs around the country as we did last week, say, it's experience that counts. That's over a picture of yourself, sir. Implying that you've had more governmental executive decision-making experience than your opponent. Now, in his news conference on August 24th, President Eisenhower was asked to give one example of a major idea of yours that he adopted. His reply was, and I'm quoting, "If you give me a week, I might think of one. I don't remember." Now, that was a month ago, sir, and the President hasn't brought it up since. And I'm wondering, sir, if you can clarify which version is correct, the one put out by Republican campaign leaders or the one put out by President Eisenhower?
Well, I would suggest, Mr. Van-Oker, that if you know the President, that was probably a facetious remark. I would also suggest that insofar...
I just wanted to get to this point so you could see a good close-up of Nixon. Now, most Americans watching the debates felt that Kennedy had won. Interestingly, most Americans listening on radio seemed to give the edge to Nixon. Now, it was estimated that Kennedy was behind by about 1% before the debates, but then led by 4% after these four debates. So media watchers saw it as television's really its new ability to influence culture and our social consciousness, and even to the point of influencing the outcome of a presidential election. And when historians look back, what they think happened was that Kennedy was, well, I mean, he's a Kennedy, right? He looks like a guy that just got off of a sailboat. He looks like he's got a nice tan. He's got nice hair. He looks, I'm sorry to say, he looks like a Ken doll. Nixon, meantime, had just had surgery not long before. It was nothing major, but he was a little bit gaunt. He had lost some weight. He refused to use makeup, and it looked like maybe he needed a shave. Sometimes the television lights will bring that out if someone's make them look that way. He looked a little like he had been perspiring and things like that. All those things were very much visual differences, and for the first time, they really think that television actually swung the election toward the one person or the other, in this case Kennedy. Now, TV really changed political campaigning in general. And if we go even a little before that, what I'm going to show you is the very first political TV ad ever, called "I Like Ike" from 1952, a catchy phrase that people could remember. And this was used in Eisenhower's campaign against Adlai Stevenson.
Ike for president, Ike for president, Ike for president, Ike for president. You like Ike, I like Ike, everybody likes Ike for president. Hang out the banner, beat the drum, we'll take Ike to Washington. We don't want John
or Dean
or Harry, let's do that big job right. Let's get in step with the guy that's left, get in step with Ike. You like Ike.
Okay, I'm going to stop that right there. Does this ad have sort of a Disney feel to you? If it does, that's for good reason. The animated television commercial was produced by Roy Disney, Walt's brother, and Citizens for Eisenhower Nixon. Eisenhower did go on to win the Republican nomination for the presidency. And we're not, sure that this ad completely did that for him, but it probably didn't hurt. And so what we're seeing are candidates starting to market themselves very much like a brand, which I'm talking about during the advertising section of this course, using a TV commercial to sell themselves, just as corporations use commercials to sell products. So it didn't take long for TV political ads then to turn dirty. The first political attack ad aired in 1964. This was called the Daisy ad. It was paid for by supporters of then President Lyndon Johnson, a Democrat, and it was meant to make his Republican opponent, Barry Goldwater, look bad. And so they did this by featuring, as we'll see, a little girl picking petals off of a daisy in a field, and then it gets nasty. The idea, though, was that Goldwater is not mentioned by name, but the message is clear that if you vote for Goldwater, we could end up in a nuclear war. And this is because Goldwater was known for being kind of loose about his discussions of the power and possibilities of nuclear war. Let's watch that ad. You'll get the idea right away.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 6, 8, 9,
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. These are the stakes. To make a world in which all of God's children can live, or to go into the dark. We must either love each other or we must die.
Vote for President Johnson on November 3rd. The stakes are too high for you to stay home.
Pretty heavy stuff. Johnson wins in a landslide in 1964. Did this advertisement, do this for him? It's hard to say, but it didn't hurt. Political consultant Tony Schwartz produced the commercial, and he later explained, quote, "We're not packaging the candidate, we're packaging the voter. We're surrounding him with media." They would say him back then, but they were surrounding him with media. "We're tying him up and delivering him to the ballot box." He also said, quote, "The best political commercials do not tell the viewer anything. They surface his feelings and provide a context for him to express those feelings." So you are seeing this really sort of deep advertising philosophy that's really seeping into our politics. And what impact did that have? Well, negative political ads would continue. A particular problem, though, with political advertising really is the reliance on the negative political ad. And one of the big complaints about political advertising is that it's too negative. Negative ads are usually concentrated, late in the campaign, right before the election day, when it's really too late for opponents to complain or to counterattack. Negative ads, researchers say, reinforce supporters, but they don't generally change minds of people who, are against your candidate or haven't made up their minds yet. They can sway a really narrow range of undecided voters who might remain undecided right up until the time of the election. But generally, they're not super effective, even in that category. Also, they focus on some claimed character flaw in a candidate, but that moves us away from the focus on the deeper, the real issues, the more complex issues. And as you well know, they continue today. In fact, we don't have numbers yet on the 2016 election, but from 2012, 85% of Barack Obama's political ad spending was for negative ads, and some people are surprised about that. Mitt Romney was really close, 91%, and that they really continue to be highly controversial. Now, negative ads can gather their own energy as really the opposite side does complain and counterattack. Then this can become a news story, and then the attack ad can live on and on. So it's life. It's kind of like a cat. It has 9 lives. It keeps going. Attack ads aren't always from one party to another. Increasingly in primaries, we're seeing attacks within the party, which many believe possibly could weaken the party. After a primary election, then there's bad feelings. Memories can linger. And we can be, as voters, we can be confused when campaigns that have recently attacked one another now lock arms and work together. Hey, what's going on? Didn't they hate each other last week? Case in point, this ad in the primary run-up to the 2008 presidential election, this paid for by the Hillary Clinton campaign. It's, as you'll see, anti-Barack Obama. And so let's take a look at that. If I can get this to roll, there it is.
It's 3 a.m. and your children are safe and asleep. But there's a phone in the White House and it's ringing. Something's happening in the world. Your vote will decide who answers that call. Whether it's someone who already knows the world's leaders, knows the military, someone tested and ready to lead in a dangerous world. It's 3 a.m. and your children are safe and asleep. Who do you want answering the phone?
I'm Hillary Clinton, and I approve this.
She says, I approve this message, and you get the idea. But what about when media are just having some good old fun? Can that be bad for a democracy? We now have this, as you know, regular stream of political satire coming from top comedy shows such as, Saturday Night Live and The Daily Show sort of thing. And I know The Daily Show has changed, and Colbert Report has become something else. But this is just something that's just going on, and it's pushed throughout social media, all these different clips. Critics argue that these shows really maybe trivialize politics, and that all too many people now receive their political information exclusively from these comedy shows and these clips that have been pushed to them. Another case in point, during the 2008 election, Saturday Night Live relentlessly lampoons Sarah Palin, played by Tina Fey, as you'll remember, as well as other candidates such as Hillary Clinton, played by Amy Poehler. Ratings of the show skyrocketed. SNL's weekly skits were replayed on various cable and network news shows, and of course YouTube and Hulu and all the social media that was just evolving back then. And many people argued that SNL's treatment led to the eventual demise of Sarah Palin. Interestingly, however, various candidates, Barack Obama, John McCain, Hillary Clinton, and Sarah Palin, also felt compelled to appear as actual guests on Saturday Night Live and The Daily Show and Colbert and things like that. Here's one famous skit that actually makes fun of the negative 3 a.m. political ad that we just saw. And this is involving Hillary Clinton, again, questioning Barack Obama, but in this case in a satirical way.
I'm Hillary Clinton, and I approve this unfair and deceptive message.
This election is about change, but it's also about something else. Experience.
It's 3 a.m. Across our country, kids are sound asleep. But somewhere in the nation's capital, a phone is ringing. Your vote will decide who answers that call.
Hello?
Senator Clinton, I have President Obama on the line.
I'll take it.
Hillary, I'm sorry to call this late again, but I need your help.
Mr. President, what can I do?
The CIA just confirmed that Iran has completed a nuclear device. It looks like the Russians, the North Koreans, and Hugo Chavez have been helping them.
I was afraid of that. When did this start?
Apparently, the day I was sworn in. Those I trusted them. I gave them my complete, total trust. And they lied to me.
Mr. President.
Oh my God. I am so... What do I do, Hillary? What do I do?
Mr. President, you can start by getting a hold of yourself.
I can't. Don't you see that I'm in a panic? A blind, unreasoning, inexperienced panic.
So you get the idea. It's funny. I mean, it's hard. I know I kind of set this up so you feel funny about laughing at something like that, but that's something where, some experts wonder, is this kind of diluting and sort of watering down the importance of our political process? Let's talk a little bit more about criticisms of contemporary political advertising. Much of the discussion of political issues, as Habermas suggested, is contained in political advertising. One criticism is that campaign ads have led to this, and I've already talked about this commodification of candidates, packaging and selling them as ideals, much of it on a very superficial level, much the same way that ads are used to sell other items, as discussed in the advertising section, as I said. Ads often sell an image or a promise of a way of life instead of really disclosing specific information about the product. There's very much a narrow focus, a negativism. There's a superficiality of advertising that's also been highly criticized. Most TV ads focus on only one or two aspects of a candidate's qualifications, and campaign managers carefully do that. They select topics based on polls and market research that will generate the most favorable voter responses. Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? Another criticism is what we really have started with in this whole discussion of media and politics is really the high cost of political advertising. This puts an incredible burden on political candidates to raise funds. Some of the best potential candidates don't even want to run because they don't want to go through that ordeal. They don't want to be in debt. They don't want to be beholden to large financial contributors. Okay, so that's the end of Media and Governance in Politics Part 2, and we will be talking about this next, electronic populism, in Part 3.